Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. The Deeds home was depicted as a gateway to the afterlife, but in reality, it was a spec house that was constructed and deconstructed atop a hill in East Corinth, Vermont. It has no history and has never been inhabited, but in the nearby town of Rutland, Vermont, sits a home that is eerily similar, and the souls who once called this home have crossed over to the afterlife, some within these very walls. Known as Brookside, this Gothic Revival mansion features 6 bedrooms and over 6,000 square feet. The Victorian architecture is notably similar to the Deeds home, with the iconic mansard tower, steeply sloping roofline, a bay window, and the unusual covered front porch. The likeness continues inside with a quaint country kitchen that is reminiscent of a different time, much like where Barbara Maitland does dishes for the last time. A mirrored fireplace like where Adam and Barbara first realized their fate, and many wallpapered rooms that Delia would be eager to change. There is also a staircase that leads to a ghostly attic and a main staircase remarkably similar to where Lydia levitates. The home was built in 1860 by Edson P. Gilson, who was born October 5, 1839 in Rutland, Vermont. He worked as a teacher and later in banking when he began construction of this home. On June 14, 1865, he married 25-year-old Anna Clement, the daughter of Charles and Elizabeth Clement, a prominent local family. According to the 1870 U.S. Census, Edson and Anna lived in this home along with his sister and a servant and gardener, both of whom emigrated from Ireland. Despite several years of marriage, Edson and Anna did not have any children, perhaps because of Anna's illness. She was diagnosed with consumption, which today is referred to as tuberculosis. There is no telling how long she suffered with the disease. Mild symptoms may have existed for years. The illness likely progressed slowly until she was suffering from a debilitating cough and struggled to breathe. Despite amassing a sizable fortune in the marble industry, Edson was powerless to help his ailing wife. Anna passed away here on October 15, 1874, at the age of 34. Anna was so young and still had so much life to live, but she spent her final days peering out these windows, walking these halls, trapped by these walls. And perhaps she still is. Edson, likely well prepared to move on after his wife's difficult death, remarried just 4 months later and went on to have 3 children. Edson sold the house to Anna's older brother, Percival Clement. He moved into this house with his wife Maria and their 3 daughters. Percival and Maria welcomed 3 more children at this home. The 6 Clement children grew up here. They hurried to school through these doors and celebrated Christmas in these rooms. Daughter Ethel married in 1903 and Caroline in 1914. Son Robert graduated from Yale University in 1910 and married in 1915. Percival was an active politician and served as mayor of Rutland, then in the Vermont House of Representatives, and later in the Vermont Senate. He ran unsuccessfully for governor of Vermont in 1902 and 1906, but was elected in 1918, just a few months after his wife Maria passed away while traveling in Atlantic City. Percival opposed prohibition, which existed in Vermont since 1853, and rejected women's suffrage, believing that allowing women to vote would lead to a continuation of prohibition. In December 1921, Robert Clement was feeling ill as he traveled to New York City on banking business. Despite consulting with physicians, Robert's condition deteriorated and he passed away on Christmas Day 1921 from kidney disease at the age of 34, the same age as Anna Clement. Following the devastating loss, Percival returned to his home where he lived with his eldest daughter Elizabeth and completed the final days of his term as governor. Percival became the publisher of the Rutland Herald and was traveling in Philadelphia on business when he died suddenly of heart disease on January 10, 1927, at the age of 80. After Percival's death, his estate was divided, and Elizabeth moved from this large house to a nearby property known as the Old Homestead. In the 1940 U.S. Census, we see Elizabeth Clement living next door to a new family, the Bitchards, who now called Brookside home. Henry and Margaret Bitchard were Polish immigrants who arrived in the U.S. in 1904 and 1906. They were married on January 25, 1908. Devout Catholics, they welcomed 17 children over the next 25 years, 14 of whom survived to adulthood, including youngest sons Henry and Valentine, seen here in their high school years, and many years later, son Adam and daughter Veronica, who became Sister Margaret, renamed after her beloved mother. In the 1940 U.S. Census, we see Henry and Margaret living here with 12 of their children. Henry was a mechanic and earned $2,242 in 1939. His daughters, Genevieve and Anna, worked as hairdressers, and sons Stanley and Frank worked at the slate quarry, while son Andrew worked for the railroad. 18-year-old daughter Julia was mentally handicapped and never attended school and was unable to work, likely requiring a great deal of care. This home was bustling with activity in the 1940s, with growing children going to school, working, getting married, and being drafted to World War II. They hosted parties and wedding receptions and anxiously waited for their sons to return from the front lines. And then tragedy struck. On July 4, 1947, 31-year-old son Andrew, a World War II veteran, was celebrating Independence Day and driving his friend's car in Rutland when he lost control of the vehicle. The car's rear fender and bumper hooked onto a tree. The top of the vehicle was crushed as it struck another tree before righting itself and falling down an embankment. Andrew was badly injured with chest injuries and a broken clavicle. Initially, doctors saw improvement in the young man, but he passed away from his injuries the next day. His friend Frank was injured but survived. Andrew's fatal car accident is eerily similar to that of Adam and Barbara. Andrew left home, fully expecting to return, but never did, at least not physically. Years later, in 1956, Margaret underwent surgery and was diagnosed with breast cancer. She lived the next 6 months, much like Anna Clement did more than 70 years earlier, surrounded by family, but growing weaker day by day, held captive by her failing health, until her death on August 27, 1956, at the age of 68. Margaret's funeral was held here as her husband and many children said their final goodbyes. Despite these devastating losses, the Bitchard family continued to live in this home for decades. They experienced the lunar landing, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, 9/11, and the COVID pandemic right here. In 2024, Dorothy Bitchard, the last surviving member of the family, passed away here at the age of 101. She never married or had children, but she was an accomplished musician and organist at her church. I believe this photo, which was part of the real estate listing for the sale of Brookside, may be Dorothy as she looks over the property where she spent nearly all of her century-long life. I wonder if the picture above the mantel is of her mother Margaret, still watching over her home and family. Did Dorothy ever feel her mother's lingering presence, or that of her brother Andrew, who died so unexpectedly? Or perhaps Anna Clement lingered, watching over the many children who came to call this home, longing for the children she never had. The Beetlejuice films touch upon one of the greatest mysteries of life, death, in a dark yet humorous way. And while the Dietz house is nothing more than a Hollywood set, Brookside, with its similar architecture and proximity to the set location, captures the essence of what the Dietz home represented, a place you never want to leave.